Hey, how's it going? A few months ago now, I put out a video on my channel about building mandalas inside of Adobe Illustrator. And shortly after that video was out, a viewer named Daniel reached out to me and asked me to make another video, another version, where I went into more depth, literally more depth. He was hoping that I would put together a video detailing the process of making a multi-layer mandala that could be laser cut. And I thought, that's a really cool idea. I really wish I had a laser cutter. Unfortunately, I don't, and I'm sure most of you at home don't as well. So I wanted to find a way to make a video that helped Daniel out with his project, gave him the tools that he needed to create a laser cut mandala, and I wanted to also have an effect applied on the basic artwork that made it look elevated, gave it a depth effect, even though it was just artwork on your computer. So I think I found something that's like a nice happy medium. It should solve both problems. It should give people with laser cutters a nice set of base artwork to work with. And then if you don't have a laser cutter, it gives you a really cool static effect that you could then take into After Effects and animate if you wanted to give it some life. I've done that as well. I've experimented with that and I think it looks really awesome. It multiplies the level of detail that you've put into your artwork, just giving it some movement like that. So there's a lot to digest in this video. Hopefully you'll find something useful, whether you have a laser cutter, whether you're going to animate your artwork, or whether you just want to print it out and hang it on your wall. So enough chit chat, let's go jump into Illustrator and get building this thing. Okay, here we are in Illustrator. Let's get to work. The first thing you need to do is create a new document. So Command N on the keyboard will pull up your new document window. Today, I'm just going to create a 20-inch by 20-inch square. The size of your canvas and the units that you use are totally up to you. This is just random today because I have no end product in mind, but it seems like a good size. Click Create, and here we go. 20-inch square canvas. The first thing inside this document that you want to do is create your guides. So I'm going to name this layer here Guides, and I'm going to build my guides onto this layer so that I'm able to lock it and keep it all separate and clean from everything else. We're going to create a square using the rectangle tool. Press M on the keyboard to pull that up. Click once on your canvas and create a square or a rectangle that matches the size of your canvas. Then we're going to use the X and Y axis in the transform panel to position this in the center of our canvas. So we've got a 20-inch by 20-inch canvas, 10 inches and 10 inches on the X and Y axis will center this. Press Command R to toggle on your rulers, and then draw out a vertical guide, snap it to the center of that square, and then a horizontal guide, snap it to the center. If you don't have smart guides turned on, that was the pink writing that popped up when you hovered over the center, Command U will toggle that on for you. And then the last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to select the square that was in the background, and I'm going to hit Command 5, and that will turn it into its own set of guides. And I like to do that because it leaves the center point of the square in the center of our canvas. It just helps for snapping to have a center point there versus just the intersect of the vertical and horizontal guides. Now we're going to lock the guides so that nothing happens to them accidentally, and we're going to create a new layer. On this layer, we're going to add in swatches, so you can call it swatches. Sometimes I like to add my swatches on their own separate layer instead of using the swatch panel. And that just allows me to pick up the colors that I like to work with and say the stroke or stroke width or stroke characteristics that I like to work with using the eyedropper tool. So on this swatch layer, we're going to create a square. We're going to turn off its stroke and we're going to fill it with gray, about 25%. I'm working in CMYK today. It doesn't matter what color space you're in, and it doesn't matter what colors these end up being, because the end result, we're going to change the colors anyway. This is just for visual separation while we're working on our layers. The mandala today that we're going to create is going to have 3 layers, so I'm going to have 3 colors. If you're working on a more complicated document, pick a few more colors and go to town. So for a second color, let's go 50% gray, and for the last one, let's go 90%. I'm then going to create copies of these. Hold down Option Shift to drag out a copy. And then with only one selected, hit Shift X, and that will flip the stroke and the fill. We had a gray fill and no stroke, and then by pressing Shift X, we flipped it. Shift X. It's also up here in this little arrow icon to swap the fill and stroke. But you know me, key commands make things faster, so I use a lot of them. With all three of these selected, let's increase the weight just so we can see them a little bit better. And then let's drag out another copy. And now we're going to align this stroke to the inside. We're going to create another copy, and we're going to align that stroke to the outside. That will just come in handy as you're working along on your main layers, which we'll create now. You can have a shape, and then with your eyedropper, you can pick up a fill color, a stroke that's aligned to the center of the path, a stroke that's aligned to the inside of the path, or a stroke that's aligned to the outside of the path. That's a little trick with these swatches that you couldn't accomplish with these swatches up here in the swatch panel. So like I said, we're going to create a 3-layer mandala today. I've got 3 layers here set up in my layer palette. Let's name them top, middle, and bottom. In case you don't know, if you double click on a layer, you'll have the opportunity to edit the name. That's what I was doing there. So now we've got our 3 layers, top, middle, bottom. Let's go ahead and lock all but the top. Toggling through the lock and the visibility is going to be a big key to this, because as the document gets more complicated, it's really important to be able to manage and control how your layers are working together. So our top layer is where we're going to start. Let's create an ellipse. L on the keyboard pulls up your ellipse tool, find our center point, and option click to create an ellipse in the middle. Something like that. Let's pick up our top stroke color and increase the stroke width to a point that you're happy with. Then we're going to use the pen tool, P on the keyboard, to pull that up, and we're going to convert these anchor points, the top and bottom anchor point, which creates this petal shape. We're then going to select the petal shape and rotate it around the center point. So R on the keyboard pulls up the rotate tool, and then option click on the center point, and it pulls up your rotate dialog. We're going to rotate it by 45 degrees, and we're going to create a copy, which looks like this. If you've watched any of my other videos, there's a good chance that you've seen me use transform again, which is one of my favorite key commands, Command D. And all that does is it repeats the last transformation. So in this case, that transformation was a rotation of 45 degrees around a center point and the creation of a copy. So it's because we had this shape selected, I rotated another 45 and created a copy. Make sure you have this shape selected and repeat again, Command D. And this gives us the center basis of our mandala design. We're now going to grab this entire section here and we're going to copy it, Command C. So it's on our clipboard now. Now we're going to start working on the layers. So let's lock our top layer, unlock our middle layer, and paste in front, Command F. So now the exact same set of paths has been pasted into the middle layer. We're going to now select the middle fill or middle stroke color, pardon me. And we're going to increase the stroke width until it starts to peek out and look something like this. This is where we're going to get that cascading effect from. Let's lock that middle layer and move back down to the bottom. Paste in front again, because those shapes are still on your clipboard. They're going to appear one more time. And then use the eyedropper, pick up the bottom fill or bottom stroke color, I keep saying that, and increase the stroke width about there. And that's the basis for the whole project. You're going to move up and down through the layers, and you're going to create copies of paths and increase the stroke width to create this cascade, which looks really cool. Let's move back to our top layer, and we're going to create another petal shape. So we're going to use the pen tool. Let's find our middle point here. Click once, hold shift to constrain to a 45-degree angle, click again, and then find the middle of this path here and click down there. Use the eyedropper to pick up the top stroke color, increase the weight to a spot that you're happy with, and then we're going to pick up the direct selection tool. A on the keyboard would have pulled that up for you. We're going to select this corner point and we're going to round it off, and it's going to create a nice petal shape once we reflect this path across the vertical guide that we had created earlier. So O on the keyboard pulls up the reflect tool, and then if you click on the anchor point while holding Option, it'll bring up your reflect dialog box. Make sure you're reflecting across the vertical axis and hit copy. Use the direct selection arrow again, pick up both of these endpoints and hit Command J, which will join them together into one path. And now we have a slightly different petal, which we're going to rotate around the middle. So pick up the path, hold down Option, click on the center, and this one we're going to rotate around 90 degrees this time. And then we're going to hit copy. And then transform again, twice. I like this petal, so we're going to copy it down to the next layer. So Command C to copy to the clipboard, lock our top, unlock the middle, paste in front, and pick up the middle fill color, middle stroke color. I did it again. Let's increase the stroke weight. But what I'm going to do here, which is going to be neat to create some variation, instead of just doing the cascade effect all the way around, let's put this path in a different location. So it's going to create an interesting effect that looks slightly different. Let's find our middle point and let's rotate this 45 degrees, but we're not going to create a copy. Hit OK. So now it's the same path but sitting in a different location, and we're going to rotate that around again by 90 degrees. And now we'll copy it and hit Command D. So it's cool to get some variation where not every single path matches all the way down your stack. And from here, I guess the next thing to do is to create a frame. So let's create a square on our topmost layer that matches our canvas size. Now here we want it to fill the canvas, we don't want it to extend out beyond, so let's use our eyedropper and pick up our stroke that was aligned to the inside. And then we'll increase the weight to a spot where we're happy with it. And then we're going to repeat this on all of the other layers. So I copied it there to my clipboard with Command C. Let's paste it in front. Pick up this stroke color and then increase the stroke weight. Paste in front for the bottom layer, pick up the stroke color and increase the stroke weight. And there's all the frames. So the thing to consider if you are going to end up laser cutting this, or if you're working on creating an animation where you want everything to be one solid path, is that you don't want anything floating. So what I do to verify that is I'll turn off all of the other layers so that I'm isolated on just one layer. And then I could just take a look and make sure that everything is all connected at some point. So if you were to have, say, a circle in the middle, you would want that to connect somehow. Otherwise, when you started cutting, it would just become its own separate shape. Same thing with this floral shape here. It's not connected to anything. So what I would like to do at that point is just use the pen tool, and I'm going to draw a series of paths that connect all of my points here. So I've got this shape that connects. Let's rotate it around by the same factor, which was 90, to cover off all those points, and then hit copy. So technically that layer would be good to go to cut out as its own separate piece. Here we would have to do the same thing. We would have to find some way to connect in. And finally on the bottom. So what I'm doing on these strokes that are too short, I'm just picking up the end point with the direct selection arrow and sliding them out to a spot where I'm happy with them. where they fully intersect the outer border. Now we can turn that all back on and see how it's looking. You can see what I meant about having the 3 colors, making it easy to tell each layer apart, and you can see down the stack where all of your artwork lies. So technically this would be good to go. Like I said, each layer is connected and it's looking pretty good, but I'd like to add a lot more detail to it. But all the techniques are just going to be repeat of what I had done before. So I'm going to speed this whole thing up and see what it looks like at the end. So there we go. For the sake of this exercise today, I'm feeling really good with the way that that is looking. I think you can spend a lot more time finessing this, getting details to look really, really cool, really ornate. But like I said, for the sake of this exercise, this demonstration, I think that this is a good start. So the next thing that I do, regardless of whether you're laser cutting this or not, is just make copies of these layers. Because what you're gonna need to do is start to outline some strokes, and once you do that, you can't go back and edit things with any kind of control. So it's good to have these original layers just in case you want to go back and make modifications. So let's select all 3 layers and create copies. And then we're going to turn off the bottom, the originals, and we're going to work in the copy layers. So here's our top layer. Select all with Command A, and then say Object, Path, Outline Stroke, and then use the Pathfinder to unite them. And what that leaves you with is a full compound path. Everything has been cleaned up because all of those overlapping strokes have all just been merged together using the Pathfinder. You can see the difference between this top layer and this top layer. There's a bunch of strokes that visually ended in the right spot, but technically are not clean, and you wouldn't be able to laser cut this if that was your goal. So here's the clean set of paths. For the top layer, let's repeat that process here for the middle. Select all, Object, Path, Outline, Stroke, and then united with the Pathfinder. Here's the bottom, select all, Object, Path, Outline, Stroke, and unite. So now we've got 3 versions here that are all sitting on top of each other nicely. So if the goal for you from this project was to laser cut this file, you've now got 3 separate layers, and formatting the file for your laser cutter is going to be up to you. I do not have the pleasure of having access to a laser cutter, so I want to create the effect of some depth with this artwork just within Illustrator. So I'm going to take my top layer here, I'm going to select it, I'm going to make it black, I'm going to copy it so it's on my clipboard, and I'm going to use a raster effect in here. So I'm going to go to Effect, Blur, Gaussian Blur. Based on my canvas size, 30 pixels is a good blur to use, and I'm gonna say okay. This effect is, like I said, it's a raster effect, but for the time being, the path is still live and the effect can be found here in the appearance panel. So if you need to modify it, you can go back in and redo it to a new value. Anyway, we don't need to do that today because 30 pixels works. Let's now paste the original path back in front and make that white. So it's kind of like a drop shadow effect that's appearing underneath our path, and when you repeat that process on all of the other layers, it's going to start to look pretty cool. So select your path, make it black, copy it to your clipboard, apply the same effect to it, paste in front, and then make that path white. And then one last time. So that is looking pretty wild. So much detail that's created in here. That nice soft shadow that's created underneath gives the effect of this actually having some depth to it, even though it's all just a bunch of flat artwork inside of Illustrator. The last thing that I did with this, and you don't have to do the same thing, but I found that if I copied it and pasted it into Photoshop on top of a subtle texture, it looks really cool if you multiply it down. So the white disappears and only the shadow gets multiplied down on top of your subtle texture. I think that this look is just phenomenal. It looks really cool, and I'm really excited to explore with it further and see what I can do with it. Like I said, I don't have a laser cutter, so this is the next best thing. Kind of a fake or faux laser cut effect inside of Illustrator and Photoshop. So that's it, guys. That's the video for today. I'm gonna stop talking because I've talked a lot. The last thing that I will ask for, though, is if you haven't subscribed to the channel already, I would really appreciate it if you did. I'd also appreciate it if you give this video a thumbs up and drop a comment down below. Anyway, I'm gonna start working on another project now. I'm not quite sure what that is. I've got too many ideas and not enough time to execute it. So have a good one, and I'll see you in the next one.